He never imagined he'd witness this day. Kody Brown was seated on the stand, hands shaking under the table, a quietness falling over him that weighed more than any sentence. The courtroom was dark but charged. Robyn sat facing him, whipped into submission, eyes cast down, hands folded in her lap, as if waiting for the inevitable. This was not a fight in a courthouse. This was about him. A trial by no law, but with lots of truth. She was the last one. The last wife. The one he had sacrificed everything for. Christine had walked out. Janelle had wandered off. Meri had psychologically vanished long before she left her bags. And throughout it all, Robyn had stayed. Silent, helpful, faithful. At least that's what he believed. But loyalty, he was coming to realize, is not always love. And silence is not always tranquility. Silence is what is used by people when they've already left you in their hearts. The judge, symbolic, faceless, and never talking, wasn't who Kody was afraid of. It was her. It was what she could say, or what she no longer cared to clarify. He swallowed hard, looking into her eyes. "I gave up everything for you," he said, voice cracking more than he intended it to. "Everything?" Robyn didn't glance up. "I lost the respect of my children. My name is mud in every corner of this family. And I still chose you. I still defended you. Even when it cost me everyone else." She blinked slowly. It was the kind of blink that said, "I heard you 100 times before, Kody. This time, I'm not flinching." He rolled in his seat, the wooden arms of the chair suddenly too constricting, too abrasive. "Tell me, Robyn," he went on, voice just high enough to ring through the chill room, "when did you stop loving me?" She finally glanced at him. It wasn't hate that flashed in her eyes. It was something worse, disappointment. "You didn't lose them because of me, Kody," she whispered. "You lost them because you quit coming. You were so busy defending me, you forgot to stay with me." He went stiff. Of all the things he'd rehearsed to hear, anger, guilt, perhaps tears, that wasn't it. "Do you think I wanted them to go away?" she went on, her voice firm but infused with sorrow. "I didn't request that. I didn't request to be your sanctuary, while you destroyed the rest of them. I needed you. I pleaded with you not to torch bridges behind you. But you believed I was the reward, not the duty." Regret does not always result from what we lose. Sometimes it's for understanding what we destroyed in the name of love. He had no idea how to react. His hands trembled now, grasping the chair, grasping the only thing that was still within his reach. Kody had never imagined himself on this side of the table. For years he'd been the center of their stories, the husband, the decision-maker, the glue. But now, in this quiet courtroom where no one clapped, no one cried, and no one interrupted, he was just another man on trial, for promises he didn't keep. "Robyn," he whispered, "you said we'd grow old together." She gazed at him once more. This time the face broke, slightly. A flash of hurt, of things she once held on to, now slipping away quickly. "I said that when I thought we were partners," she replied. "But recently, it's been more like I was your cover story. Your alibi. You came to me whenever the others moved away. But not to mend, just to hide out. I was trying to hang on. I know," she said. "But you were never holding me. You were holding on to your pride." It's the silences that echo the longest. No jury gave voice. No gavel came crashing down. But in Kody's heart, the sentence had already come crashing down like a hammer. This wasn't about a marriage dissolving. This was about coming to the realization he'd constructed an entire world on one assumption, that Robyn would always be there. And perhaps, she would, physically, out of habit, out of common children, but not out of love, not out of the type of bond that had a man feeling selected. She stood up from her chair. "I'm not leaving you, Kody," she said, her voice calm but exhausted. "But I also cannot continue to pretend that this is what love is." And suddenly she stepped down, not in rage, not with firecrackers, but with the same silent finality that tears a man open wider than rage ever would. Kody remained alone, still in the witness stand, no longer questioned, no longer defended, just one man looking at the void where love once was, and finding he wasn't alone in the feeling of abandonment. He didn't budge, not when Robyn left the room, not when silence closed in around him like a vice. He just sat there gazing at the chair she had just vacated. It still swayed softly from her departure, as if a ghost hadn't yet finished its sentence. For a man who had had 4 wives and over a dozen children, Kody had never been more alone. This trial was not real, not legally speaking. There were no attorneys, no bailiffs, no documentation, but it was real when it counted most emotionally. Spiritually, the kind of accountability that pays no attention to rules, only to truth. The truth was, he had bet everything on Robyn's fidelity, and now she was also disappearing too. He gazed about, vacant benches, imaginary onlookers, but in his thoughts, there were people. Christine with arms folded across her chest, Janelle, cold eyes, Meri, aloof, even Gwen, Leon, and Garrison, the ones who once called him dad readily, were present in this room of his own judgment. He felt their criticism like warmth. He stood up from the witness stand, slowly as if there were lead weights in his feet. If stone made up the floor, the gavel hadn't dropped yet, but he knew it would. It always does. And worst of all, this time he wasn't even on trial. He was being remembered. Memories are crueler than trials, because they don't lie. He walked slowly, arriving at the room's center, where Robyn had sat just seconds before, her words still ringing in his ears. You were never holding me. You were holding your pride. She'd sliced him clean. No yelling, no swearing, just a blade of truth, and it cut deeper than anger. He resented that she'd done it calmly, resented that she still appeared the better person, because now he wasn't sure who the victim was anymore. The most dangerous kind of pain is the kind that questions your own innocence. He thought back to the last few years, the whispered conversations, the late-night confessions, the yes against the world pact he made with Robyn after the other wives left. He had told himself they were the strong ones, that theirs was the real marriage. But somewhere along the way, real became routine. He recalled the nights she wept in bed, and he rolled over too weary, too exasperated, too certain it wasn't his responsibility. He believed she was simply overwhelmed, that she'd come to her senses. She never did, because it wasn't a phase. It was a gradual departure. He just hadn't realized she was sending her heart away in silence. Kody sat down once more, this time in the judge's chair. There was no one to prevent him. This was his courtroom, after all, his mind, his day of judgment. He glanced around the make-believe room. If anyone has anything to say, he breathed sarcastically, now's your turn. And then from out of the darkness, a voice did respond. Not Robyn, not Christine, but Meri. He could see her now in stark relief, standing by the rear wall, arms folded, eyes far away. You only loved people when they made you strong, she said. The second we needed you weak, you escaped. Kody's mouth opened, but no words emerged. Then Christine advanced. You blamed us for leaving, but you never once asked why we were already gone before we packed our bags. Then Janelle, flatter and harder. You used Robyn as your reason for not even attempting. Now she's finally being honest with you, and you're still acting like it's all about your sacrifice. When everybody says the same thing, perhaps it's not betrayal, perhaps it's your own reflection. He stood up again, unsteadily as if the gravity of their words had actual weight. You all left, he said, breath unsteady, and now you're going to act like you were always right. But they were gone. Of course they were. He was alone again. The courtroom dissolved for an instant, just faded away into quiet, and he was standing in his own living room, the actual one, not the one in his mind, but the one in his vacant Flagstaff house. The clock ticked on. The light flickered. Robyn's teacup remained on the kitchen counter, its surface unbroken. He made his way towards it, fists pushed deep into pockets, shoulders slumped like a beaten man. She hadn't physically left, but her presence no longer occupied the space, and he realized something which was really horrifying. Robyn had already emotionally left. She had only been waiting for him to catch up, and now that he had, she had nothing else to say. Revenge isn't always deafening. At times it's turning one's back upon the other, when the latter finally wishes to hear. He took up the teacup, warm still. She'd just gone out. Perhaps she was upstairs. Perhaps she'd never actually left the house. But he didn't search for her, because what could he say? Don't leave me. He'd said that to Christine, begged that from Janelle, pleaded it towards Meri, even if it was just in the guise of stilted calls. And now, he was low on women to beg from, because it wasn't the wives alone who had departed. It was who they stood for. Connection, identity, even religion. He had bet everything on Robyn being his final safe gamble. And now, she was exhausted too. Not theatric, not furious, merely exhausted. Exhausted from being the one to catch pieces. When he broke all else apart, he didn't recall sitting back down. He was sitting there again. That chair. The center of the courtroom that lived in his mind. Witness seat. Confession box. The seat of his voice. When it still carried weight, it now echoed. This time, the courtroom felt cold. Really cold. Not a cold symbol, but cold. Then the door creaked open. Robyn walked back in. Slowly, purposefully. Like a woman who knew she still had something to say, without wanting to say it twice. She didn't look at him at first. She walked straight to the middle of the room, her heels soft against the polished floor. She wasn't angry. She wasn't dramatic. But she was done pretending. "You're not used to being the one left," she said softly, still facing the judge's bench. "Not him. Are you?" Kody blinked. Her voice hit harder than he expected. No shouting, just precision. "No," he admitted. "I'm not." She turned, finally glancing at him. Her eyes were red, but not from new tears, from having held them back. "Do you remember when you said you'd never leave me? That regardless of how much the family disintegrated, we'd cling together." "I meant it," he said. "I still do." She nodded slowly. "That's the issue." He frowned. "How? You think loving me is that I should just accept all you ruin in my name? Sometimes love isn't protection, it's permission. And that's not love at all." He leaned in, elbows on knees, reaching out to keep her eyes. "You think I wanted any of this to break apart? I didn't. I never wanted to lose the others." She cocked her head. "But you didn't battle for them either. Not really. You made them feel second best. And when they left, you held on to me as if I were a trophy, not as a human being." That stung. He got to his feet, pacing. "You don't understand what it was like, Robyn, the accusations, the resentment, the pressure to be everything to everyone. You were my one safe haven. And that's what I stopped being." More silence. Heavy, terrible silence. He jerked around to face her. "You think I used you? I think you used me as cover," she said. "And when the others began to go, you didn't mourn. You rationalized. You told me they were selfish, rebellious, ungrateful, but you never once asked what they were missing." He shook his head. "You're rewriting history." "No, Kody," she said. "I'm getting it right for the first time. The truth is not painful when it's spoken. It's painful when it's believed." He pounded a hand against the podium, not in rage, but in desperation. "Then why did you remain? If I was so blind, why didn't you go with them?" Her expression softened, momentarily. "Because I loved you." She glided to the edge of the judge's bench now, where his voice had resonated just a few hours before. "And because I hoped you would wake up before it was too late." He gazed at her. "And is it?" She replied, not with words, but with a heavy, drawn-out breath. Then she moved into the center of the courtroom, the emotional spotlight in which he had once pleaded for connection, and looked up. "Your Honor," she addressed the silent figure sitting at the bench, "I would like to present my testimony." Kody stiffened. This was no longer a confrontation. It was a trial, and he was no longer in command. "Proceed." The silent judge could have told him in his mind. Robyn nodded. "I loved him amidst the chaos, amidst the collapse, amidst every fight that wasn't between him and me, and every fight that was. I stood up for him when others accused him of being manipulative. I justified his absence when the kids cried behind closed doors. I tolerated being the center of his world, even when it cost me carrying the responsibility of every loss." Kody's heart pounded. "I told myself he was trying, that he was broken by love, not driven by ego. But over time, I saw it more clearly." She turned to him now, eyes sharp. "You didn't choose me because I was special, Kody. You chose me because I let you feel like you still had control. Being chosen isn't a compliment when it means someone else was discarded." He wanted to argue, but what could he say? That she was mistaken, that he had loved her otherwise. Yes, he had, but had that otherness been based on truth, or on the consolation she provided? Robyn moved to the gallery then, pointing to the vacant seats where their children's hearts once filled. "They witnessed all of this. Our children. The older ones, the younger ones. And they've learned more from what we didn't say than from what we did." Kody looked where she was looking, and he saw their children's shadows in his head. Gwen tough and wounded. Leon, speechless, withdrawn. Garrison, lost to him forever. Even baby Ariella and Solomon. How long before they too started asking the questions he couldn't answer? When did we stop being a family? He whispered. Slowly, Robyn turned to him. When you began to call this love, and not remember that love listens. He sat again, but unwillingly, because he could no longer support its weight. Judgment doesn't always fall from a gavel. Sometimes it exits the room and leaves you alone in your own silence. Robyn retrieved her coat from the back of the imaginary chair. She hurried not at all. She didn't shake. She simply moved toward the door like a woman who knew she had spoken all she came to speak. He cried out, cracking. Robyn, she stopped at the door. I didn't know how to repair it. She nodded. That's because you never took a glance at what was really broken. And then she stepped out. No bang, no tempest, only the sound of the door shutting. And Kody again, alone with all he tried to bury. The courtroom was quiet once more, but not vacant. Kody sat in the middle, frozen as a statue, looking at the door Robyn had just passed through. Her steps had passed into silence. Her heat had dissipated, but her words lingered behind, sticking to the air like the smoke off a fire he couldn't confess to having lit. He rested forward, elbows on his knees, clasped hands. Not what's broken, he breathed, repeating Robyn's final words. Look at what's actually broken. He didn't need to imagine long. The courtroom shifted, not with new walls, but new faces. The benches started filling again, but this time, it wasn't the wives, it was the kids. Garrison sat up front, arms folded, jaw clenched. Leon sat next to him, eyes averted. Gwen in the corner, earbud in one ear, but her gaze fixed on him as if she expected a confession. Even Solomon and Ariella were there, too young to get it, but there anyway. They didn't say anything, but he could sense their questions, not the ones they had asked in the past. Why did Mom leave? Why don't we go see Dad anymore? Why is everything different now? No, these ones came from deeper spaces, unspoken, lurking, and destructive. Some judgments aren't spoken in words. There are those that are written in the silence of those whom you once followed. He rose again, as if providing testimony now to them. I never stopped loving any of you, he said softly, even when it seemed like I did. Silence still. He looked around the room, recalling birthdays skipped, calls avoided, long uncomfortable pauses on Zoom. I was trying to keep the family intact, he went on. But the harder I tried, the more it unraveled. And I thought if I just dumped everything into one basket, into Robyn, maybe something could be salvaged. His gaze landed upon Garrison's face, but Garrison no longer looked at him with rage, just with exhaustion. Like a son who had waited too long for the sort of father who appears when no one is looking. A flash of recollection struck Kody's chest. Garrison's graduation, the vacant seat where Kody ought to have been, the graduation photo he had not taken part in, the months that followed in silence. He gulped hard. I told myself I was keeping peace safe, he said, but honestly, I was hiding in it. Abruptly, the lights in the courtroom faded, and a single spotlight illuminated the center of the floor. A screen materialized, imaginary yet real, and Kody saw himself. A moment from 3 years ago. He was shouting. Robyn was sobbing. Christine was folding up to leave. Gwen was standing at the top of the stairs, listening. He never noticed her there before. But now he saw it. The price of a decision isn't paid in the moment. It's paid in who walks away afterwards. The screen shifted once more. Another scene. Another fight. This time, Solomon's hand was held by Janelle, protecting him from the fight, while Kody stormed the living room, voice escalating. He shut his eyes. These weren't dramatization. These were flashbacks, unfiltered, unforgiving. And then, one last picture. Him standing alone in the kitchen, shouting into the house. Robyn, no response. Sal, no response. Everyone had cleared out. And still, he'd convinced himself that he was the victim. He faced back, the courtroom now black behind him, save for the faint silhouette of the children, still observing. I thought if I just maintained the structure, the faith, the rules, it would all endure. He struggled with the next words. But the structure didn't mean anything if no one was safe within it. The children disappeared into darkness. And then, the judge finally got a word out. a voice deep, ancient, and unchanging. But it wasn't a man's. It was Meri's voice, soft yet strict. And now, Kody Brown, do you see what this trial was actually about? He nodded hesitantly, head down. I believe they were betraying me. He spoke. But you betrayed yourself first. The voice spoke. Revenge does not always appear as fire. Sometimes it is the icy knowledge that no one's returning. Kody took a stance in the middle of the room. He glanced up at the invisible ceiling, at the weight above, at the show, the cameras. Years spent attempting to prove something to the world. What had he proved? That he could juggle wives? That he could control a home? That he could survive change? Or merely that a man, even with wives and children all around him, might still end up the loneliest individual in the room? He shut his eyes and thought of their faces again. Robyn hurt, Christine free, Janelle distant, Meri silent, and all the kids older now, wiser, tired. I wasn't just your husband, he whispered. I was supposed to be your father, your friend, your safe place. The lights in the courtroom continued to fade, until only he was left in view. And then there was the sound. Not the gavel, but the tick of a clock. Not loud, not urgent, just steady. Time, passing, moments lost. And Kody understood what this test had always been about. It wasn't about innocence or guilt. It wasn't about divorce or marriage. It was about legacy. And his was falling away from him like sand. Ultimately, the last judgment is this. Were you a person they were proud to love, or someone they had to live through? And in that courtroom, quiet, figmental but agonizingly real, Kody Brown at last heard the only verdict that counted. His own. The lights had faded, not only in the courtroom, but in his chest, in his memory, in the space of Kody Brown, that once thought he was the glue that kept it all in one piece. Now, he was beginning to question whether he'd only been the hand clamping everything together until it snapped. He remained in the middle of the room, where Robyn had left him. The benches lay vacant once more. The judge's bench, still up high, but now the walls started changing. Not in a physical way, but in an emotional one. The grain of the wood turned into drywall. The echo dissipated into plush carpet. And he was home again, in their house in Flagstaff. But it wasn't present day. It was a memory. A moment pieced together by guilt. He stood in the hall. Robyn was behind a shut door. He could hear her sobbing. He recalled that day. It was shortly after Meri had moved out for good. Robyn had been beside herself. The tension hung in the air. And instead of going in, instead of holding her, he had walked downstairs, turned on the TV, told himself she needed space. But what she had needed was him. Some betrayals don't come from action. They come from absence. The courtroom faded back into view. Kody stood still. The screen behind him lit up again, playing a scene he'd never wanted to rewatch. It was a confessional clip from years ago. There he was, smiling but tired, justifying, explaining, defending his decision, saying things like, I'm doing my best. They don't understand the pressure I'm under. I wish they'd just give me credit. At the time he believed those words were fair, even noble. But now, watching them replay under the courtroom lights, they sounded hollow, like a man trying to convince himself he was a victim, while his family quietly gave up. Another clip played. Christine, just before she left. I don't feel loved. I haven't in a long time. He recalled watching that clip. When the show first came on, he had rolled his eyes, blamed her for dramatizing. But now, it had sounded like a confession he never responded to. One by one, the wives' voices filled the courtroom, like testimonies locked in time. Janelle. He stopped listening. He only heard what he wanted. Meri, I remained because I had faith in the covenant. But faith is nothing when there is no love. Robyn, he made me the focal point of his survival. I never requested that. He sank to the floor. The lights overhead flickered like shattered faith. The ground under him split like everything he had constructed. And then he heard it. His own voice. Not modern day. Not from a confessional. But from long ago. Before the show. Before the fame. I just want a big family. One where everyone feels safe. Loved. Equal. He gagged on it. Because that version of him, that young, optimistic guy, was gone. It hurts to lose others. But it hurts more to lose the best version of you. A mirror stood before him, now right in the middle of the courtroom. It was tall, old-looking, with a frame constructed of every shattered promise. He took a step forward, and saw not who he was, but what he had become. Gray in the eyes, hard in the jaw,
still imposing in looks, but empty behind the eyes. He resembled a man who'd made it through the flames, yet discovered he'd been the one to strike the match. In the reflection of the mirror, the courtroom grew full once more, but nobody glanced at him in judgment. This time, they regarded him with disappointment, which somehow stung more. Disappointment does not scream, it simply turns away. He reached out and touched the mirror. I didn't mean for it to turn out like this, but the reflection did not flinch, because mirrors do not lie, and they do not forgive. They simply reflect what is there. He let his hand fall, and the courtroom changed again. Now he was in a church. Small, quiet, wooden benches, a dusty pulpit. The judge's bench had become the altar, and instead of robes and gavels, the stillness bore a new title, faith. He moved to the front, glanced at the vacant seats, and addressed not a jury, but God. I thought I was doing this for you, he said quietly, for covenant, for obedience, for structure. A lone candle burned, but along the way, somewhere, I began doing it for me. He remained quiet, the candle extinguished, and he knew what would become of the courtroom next. A graveyard, not with tombstones, but with symbols. One bench had trust, another, connection the third, legacy and the fourth one, love. He strolled through them slowly, like a man who came to the ruins of his own dream. You can't revive a life you never lived. As he came to the last bench, something held him back. A picture, face down on the ground. He stooped and picked it up. It was a photo of all the wives, all the children, a messy, lovely family portrait, taken in the early days. Smiles, hugs around each other, faces full of light. And there he was, center of all that. He gazed at it for a while, then flipped it over. On the back, something was scrawled. You had it all. We were waiting for you to see it. The candle flared up behind him, not out of forgiveness, but out of recognition. And that was when Kody finally realized, this courtroom, this trial, this entire reckoning, it was never about punishment. It was about clarity. You can't mend what you never confronted. And now, finally, he had confronted it. Not in rage, not in denial, but in sorrow. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was the start of something new. The candle behind him juddered. The picture in his hand was heavier than it ought to have been, as though all smiling faces in the frame were questioning the same thing. Why weren't we enough? Kody gazed at it until his vision went blurred. Then he set it on the bench, labeled love, about face, and headed towards the middle of the courtroom. He was at the place where it had all begun, where he sat first to confront Robyn, where he used to think he could rationalize it all. Something had shifted. The courtroom was no longer dim. It glowed softly like light after a storm. The benches were still vacant, the judge's bench still presiding, but the balance had shifted. He wasn't defending himself anymore. He wasn't waiting to be saved. He was ready. I have nothing else to say, Kody whispered to the unseen room. And for the first time, silence felt like an answer. Not a punishment, but a release. When you finally stop defending the wrong version of yourself, the truth has room to speak. The judge's chair squeaked overhead, but no voice spoke. There was no gavel, no sensational verdict, only a mirror, still in the same place where he had put it. He turned to look at it one final time, and this time, he didn't see the man who had failed. He saw the boy who had begun it all, bright-eyed, hopeful, believing that love could be multiplied, that faith could hold it all, that family was worth fighting for. And Kody addressed that boy directly. I wanted to protect them. I wanted to be strong. The boy did not react. He simply stared. And Kody got it. Strength had never been the issue. It was what he did with it. The mirror dissolved, and slowly a gentle voice, Robyn's voice, came back. But this time, it wasn't raging. It was soft. I never stopped loving you, Kody. But I couldn't keep loving a version of you that wouldn't grow. Tears rolled down his face. Not searing, angry ones, but gentle ones. The kind that arrive when the battle's done, and all that remains is truth. He spoke softly to the room, to Robyn's memory, to Christine, to Janelle, to Meri. I hear you now. He anticipated silence, but this time, something else occurred. The benches started to glow, not with individual, but with presence, as if the love they once felt was still there, still resonating, still accessible. If not for restoration, then at least for respect. Some things can't be fixed, but they can be respected. Kody glanced up at the judge's bench. It was vacant now. The trial was done. But before he could exit, a door creaked open in the back. And there Robyn stood. She didn't say a word. She didn't smile. She just gazed at him, and he nodded, not asking for forgiveness, not making excuses.
Just recognizing, and she nodded in return, then turned and went her way. Not quickly, not slowly, just finished. Kody breathed in. He gazed about the courtroom for a final time. The wood, the light, the benches crowded with specters. And then he murmured, I lost it all. But perhaps now, finally, I comprehend why. The candle flickered out once more, and the room vanished. He opened his eyes, not in the courtroom, not in a recollection, but in his actual home. The air was still. His palms leaned upon his knees. A photo album lay open next to him. Pictures of family vacations, birthday parties, holidays they had once pretended were peaceful. And the last page was left white. Waiting, he grabbed a pen, to write no new history, to reconcile the history he had. Kody Brown, once the father, once the medal, once the man who believed control was love, finally realized, you can't keep a family together by holding on tighter. You keep it together by listening when it breaks apart. And even if it never comes back to you the way you want it to, you can still grow into someone worth remembering. The Last Judgment isn't about guilt, it's about growth. And for the first time, Kody was ready to grow, even if nobody was looking. He shut the photo album, stood, and walked into the still house, not to look for Robyn, not to reclaim what was lost, but to begin appearing in the spaces he used to disappear.